All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about uh, the Caribbean, its history and the culture, and mainly how whenever the Caribbean was colonized by Europe, uh, how it transformed into the cultural diffusion from Africa to the Caribbean. So, starting off, we all know, based off of what we read in Savas and everything that we've done so far in the unit, that the Europeans came to the area, uh, seemed peaceful at first, and then it turned into the Europeans trying, or actually conquering and enslaving the native people. Then they started to do some trading between the Caribbean and the home European countries. This was known as the Columbian Exchange. They would grow in the Caribbean and Americas, such as things such as tobacco, pumpkins, squash. They had turkeys, chocolate or cocoa beans, avocados, potatoes were a big one, and vanilla sent it over to Europe and Asia. And then in return, the Europeans and Asians would bring livestock, sugar cane, bananas, citrus fruits, honeybees, and one big one, which is disease. Now, because of the disease, like smallpox, influenza, typhus, uh, whooping cough, the native slaves were starting to die off, or they would flee from their European masters. So the native slaves were depleting, and they couldn't manage to run these haciendas or plantations. So they began importing slaves from Africa, which turned into the slave trade from Africa to the Americas in between the years of 1650 to 1860. During this time, approximately 10 to 15 million enslaved people were transported from Western Africa to the Americas, and most were shipped to the West Indies, also known as the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. Um, the areas in Africa they would get these slaves from would be Senegal, Sierra Leone, what's known as the Slave Coast, which is that little inlet area in Africa on the west coast, the Congo, and Angola. These were the main areas that they would get the slaves from. Now, once the slaves began to realize how to get their freedom, and the countries that were colonies for Europe uh, started to gain their own freedom from Europe, the slaves that were there began to culturally diffuse the African culture into the Caribbean culture. Culturally diffusing, I like to explain it like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without a knife to spread the, the peanut butter and jelly. So, one side of the bread, you have your jelly, the other side, you have your peanut butter, right? Uh, and if you just plop the jelly on one side and plop the peanut butter on the other side, you can't really spread it without a knife. So what you have to do is you have to squish it together and smear it together to create one sandwich. So this is culturally diffused, or it's the spreading of a culture with another culture. Um, the main part of the culture that was diffused from Africa to the Caribbean would be their music. They have steel drums, guitars, the little maraca things with the beads on them, and that it was mainly just what they had around they could make music with. Uh, Another part that was culturally diffused would be their clothing, as you can see in this picture here. Uh, it's going to be a lot similar to the African clothing that I'll show you in a little bit. And then the art forms that were transformed from Africa to the Caribbean use a lot of the same colors, the same styles of art, uh, and then some festivals. Now, the festivals, granted in Africa, they are probably a lot smaller and they do it a lot bigger over in the Caribbean, but they use the same type of beading and decorations for their festivals. Um, so let's compare the clothing first. Here you have our three musicians. They're wearing the traditional Caribbean clothing. Um, just notice the colors, the patterns, and everything like that. Then here we have a couple students in Africa from the region in traditional clothing. And it's very, very similar to the Caribbean clothing. Next, we talked about the art. So here we have some art from the Caribbean. And let's compare it to the African art. This is art from Africa. It uses the same colors, the same kind of like earthy, uh, uh, you know, there's a lot of landscape in it, and it depicts their people and their clothing as well. And then the other thing that was culturally diffused would have been their dancing. There's a lot of same dancing between Caribbean and Africa. So that's how the slave trade culturally diffused into the Caribbean culture, the current Caribbean culture. If you have any questions, message me on Canvas or ask me in our Zoom meeting.